The logical endpoint is if you don't lock up a guy for cheating on his fucking taxes or loan fraud early, like in the 70s when he was doing this, right? It's just going to metastasize.
He's going to get a reality TV show.
And he's going to become Hitler. Okay?
Exactly.
Good morning.
Good morning. It may not be the morning for the listener, but...
Geez, it could be any old time of day. When they're knowing some of these characters, probably the afternoon. They've just woken up.
Exactly, but it's the morning for us.
Big morning, big week. It's not just the last episode of our limited series, Al Capone All-American. It's not just the 27th episode and final episode of the first season of this podcast.
Wow.
But
there's something else coming.
There's a third thing coming, which is, Alana, this is what for you?
My last episode as co-host of The Outfit. It has been a pleasure and a total blast to do. I am going to come as a guest at some point.
Schedule
permitting.
I'm
not gone forever, but I'm going to be focusing on my...
I'll certainly try to squeeze you in. I mean, we'll see what we can do on the calendar, okay?
Send Dan a message if you want me on as a guest.
Of course we'll have you back.
And yeah, I'm going to be focusing on my one true love and primary day job of editing magazine.
What was it that medicine's my wife, writing's my mistress, you know?
Wow.
I forget, some guy said that.
That's
some Russian.
Some guy.
No, we are so happy for you, Alana. You are going onwards and upwards to amazing things. I'm cool. I got a podcast.
Yeah, Dan will be continuing on.
I will be continuing on with a wonderful new co-host who, as soon as he gets out of prison, you guys are going to love this guy, which leads to the second part of this, right? Another big change. The next season of the Outfit podcast will be independent.
Yes.
On Patreon. So check
He's
that out.
He's looking at me. Like for acceptance.
I'm talking to you right now.
Okay. Yes.
So check out the Patreon link below.
Check it out.
Some would say I should have been saying on every episode, subscribe.
Yeah, no, I feel like we never said that.
I literally never said that
I never
once.
even thought of it. But if you don't subscribe to this podcast, you should, because what's going to happen is season 2, this new version of the podcast is all going to be publishing into the same feed. So you don't have to do anything.
That's right. The RSS feed, you subscribe, you'll just be on to the next thing. Seamless transition, right? And the Patreon will be a way of supporting it, getting some bonus stuff, getting some ad-free stuff maybe. We got to figure out some of that stuff, but please sign up now so you'll be aware of all of that. But Alana, it's been so wonderful having you along for this ride, really. And it's been, people don't know, it's been a long ride.
It has been a long ride. Years.
Literally years. Yeah.
Yes. Before you started listening, we were developing it for quite some time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird to think about it no longer being in my orbit, but...
And it's weird I just found out Al Capone died. Did you know that?
No idea.
So, like...
No idea.
We're ending on a bit of a bummer note, you know? Like,
a lot of things are dying, but...
Well, that's the thing. You know, everything's changing so constantly, you know? This crazy world we're on, just spinning around, you know? Who knows what tomorrow will bring, you know? This week, my catalytic converter got stolen, you know? By a real criminal, by the way, who, and let me speak directly to the catalytic converter thief.
It was definitely, they knew it was your car.
I want to send a message directly to you. They got Al Capone. Do you think you'll walk on this? Because I don't, all right? They got him, public enemy number 1. You are a real menace.
Meanwhile, there's no way they're catching those guys.
Absolutely no.
They've been doing it for years.
I did a police report, and basically there was the sound of laughter when you hit submit. Like, ha, you know.
Yeah.
But isn't it amazing? We can't catch a catalytic converter thief, but we can put Al Capone in prison. And that's what we're going to be talking about on today's episode.
Yeah, I mean, so does everyone know?
Well, that's a great question because I think...
And what he was caught for is what I mean.
This is it, right? Everyone knows, it's such a cliche to say, oh, they get Capone on tax evasion, and it's become a shorthand now for they get the guy, but not for the thing he's actually most guilty of, for murder.
Yeah, it's never the worst crime.
Right? They get him for speeding ticket at the Indy 500, that sort of thing, right? And that is true. That is what they got him for. What I find interesting is, as I was researching this, and it's the subject of today's episode, his final downfall, how he actually got put away, the received wisdom about how Al Capone got on tax evasion is not really true. We have this whole conception of the untouchables and these fearless, prohibition agents and all this. And it's been fed by the media. It's been fed by these myths. It's not really true. The truth is both more boring and more interesting. It's a weird mishmash. I'll try to describe what I mean by that as we go through it. And it involves also the government and the federal government in a way that's going to be more reminiscent, I think, for people nowadays than you might think, because it's a lot about federal law enforcement coming into its own. And as we've seen lately with ICE agents, this is sort of the final endpoint of this sort of power amassing in the federal government. So hopefully it's going to be a timely one to close out the episode, close out the season, close out the...
And it's tax season. Which you should do as soon as possible. Sponsored by TurboTax.
Yeah, those, speaking of gangsters, okay? Yeah. We'll get
Dan,
into it
have you
all.
ever liked a company?
I'm cool with, you know what? I told a kid at the
It's
school.
kind of, just so you're clear, like every company Dan hates.
No, that's not true. I explained to a kid the other day, we were talking about cookies, and I was like, they were like, I really like marshmallow. And I was like, do you know what Malamars are? And they didn't. And I got to explain what a Malamar is. Do you know what a Malamar is?
No, I don't.
Okay. We got to do a whole episode
I'm sorry.
on that.
I'm sorry. We can't explain it. We can't get into it.
Go Google Malamars.
I'm sure they're owned, though,
them.
by some bigger corporation that's evil.
Monsanto. Okay. So let's talk about a regular guy from Chicago, who you said, oh, that's a familiar name, because we talked about him with...
There have been so many guys on this podcast. Sometimes,
what are we, the Guys podcast?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think we are.
Podcast.
That's a lot of podcasts. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that name sounds familiar. Elliot Ness. That's our main character today.
Yeah, he is. He's a guy.
Who is he?
All right. Let me tell you who this guy is.
Tell me who this guy is.
You've seen The Untouchables. He's Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we did an episode on this on Scott Hasn't Seen It with Scott Aukerman. It's the popular conception of Elliot Ness, crime fighter who took down Capone. He looks like this. He is a handsome sort, typical prohibition agent, right? Mm-hmm. Square, clean-cut type-looking guy, got the suit, got the hair.
The perfect hair.
Right, the perfect hair and all that. He's holding the papers. He's like, let's do some work,
Let's get to work.
Let's get to work.
He's basically the perfect person for propaganda.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the sort of... Here's the thing where we get into with Elliot Ness. The myth is so wrong about him that this is the guy who took down Capone, that it sort of swung in the opposite direction, maybe a little too far, where it's like denigrating him. And the answer is like somewhere in the middle, right?
Okay.
Where it's like, okay, he is a typical prohibition agent from Chicago, got the job through his brother-in-law, not uncommon for prohibition agents at that time, right? And most of them do that sort of thing, pull connections, get on there to be rich and corrupt, right? And in fairness, he doesn't do that. I don't know that he was ever a natural policeman, to be honest.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that policing at that time was sort of a rougher trade. There was no FBI. There was no white collar sort of law enforcement. He's a college graduate, for instance, that was sort of unusual.
Got it. They're kind of just working the beat.
Yeah.
Walk in the neighborhood.
That's really it. And it was a lot more thuggish, actually, than maybe even, well, maybe not now, but it was a thuggish job.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just always been a thuggish job, right? Another interesting thing, he has a problem with alcohol.
Okay.
So there's a human element too that
the prohibition element.
Yeah, I mean, despite him being a prohibition agent, he has a lifelong issue with alcohol.
And is he drinking throughout Prohibition? Or
This is a matter of some historical debate.
Okay.
We know that he is more of a drinker later in life, so I'm willing, but probably, come on. Let's be real. But all that's to say, he's a complex individual and not just this, like if you watch the movie version of Untouchables with Kevin Costner, he's a white bread good guy, you know? There was talk of casting Mickey Rourke as Elliot Ness.
Oh,
That would have been interesting.
incredible.
Yeah, that would have been a little closer to the mark of him having some shit going
Some
on.
issues.
Yeah.
There's some stuff. And and this was pre-Insane Face Mickey Rourke.
Oh yeah,
This was like the heyday of Mickey Rourke's beauty.
This is Mickey Rourke. This is Pope of Greenwich Village Mickey Rourke.
Yes.
This is that Mickey Rourke. I just did
but
it perfectly.
still with an edge.
He had a bit of an edge. Don't get on Mickey's bad side, okay? But like Mickey Rourke, Elliot Ness had a yen for publicity and bringing journalists along on raids because what he's doing in his capacity as a prohibition agent is taking down Capone's stills, his bootlegging operations, his trucks, his breweries, first in Chicago Heights, which is an important suburb for Capone, and then in Chicago proper. And this is the origin of what later becomes the Untouchables, that his squad of kick-ass, uncorruptible prohibition agents brought down Capone's downfall. And the truth is more complicated than that, of course, right? So to get into how this actually all turned about, we should think about what life was like for Al Capone in 1931. And I would say it's not so good.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, and we talked about that last episode.
We did. He is dodging subpoenas, right? He is battling a sort of annoying running contempt of court charge where he's constantly putting off going to jail for it. But that's really the least of his troubles. The biggest of his troubles, I would say, is what everyone's biggest trouble at that time was, which is the Great Depression. The stock market crash has happened in the fall of 1929. Receipts are down across the board, including for the mob. So Jack Guzik, the main money man for the Capone mob, says to him, we're down across the board, right? We're losing money, and we are having to tighten our belts a little bit on even corrupting public officials. It's called austerity.
It's amazing.
Yeah, even these guys have to do this.
He also has the problem of the mob sort of over his shit, I feel.
In the last couple of years since the St. Valentine's Day massacre, all right, first off, the PR disaster of that massacre, 7 dead men, ultimately laying at Al Capone's doorstep, though not legally. He goes to the Atlantic City conference. The other big mafia leaders in the rest of the country tell him, you are fucking this up for everyone.
You need to fly under the radar, buddy.
And so he goes to Philadelphia, purposefully gets himself arrested on a gun charge. He thinks he'll be away for a couple months, let it cool down. The judge gives him a year. And in that year, the mobsters back in Chicago, because Capone's already been more and more of an absentee boss, right? They're
He's
like,
in Florida.
He's in Florida, he's in Wisconsin, he's wherever. They're like, I think we can run this.
We can do this without him.
Yeah, ourselves, kind of. To the point that when he does return to Chicago, one of the journalists observing him up close starts to think, I feel like this guy's starting to become a figurehead,
Wow.
Which is interesting. So that's not good. Frank Nitti, his old childhood friend who used to be in the same street gang as him, is slowly rising in the background as much more of the traditional and future mob boss. Quiet, ruthless, unsentimental, does not court publicity, hates talking to anyone. That's going to be the model going forward. And there, unfortunately, his problems do not end. The political tide has turned.
He has every problem.
He has every problem, including syphilis.
Yeah, health problems. We'll get to that later.
We will. Big Bill Thompson, the mayor, who basically was Donald Trump, time-traveling Donald Trump.
Yes.
He is increasingly senile.
Wow.
Make of that what you will. Increasingly vacationing outside the city, increasingly weakened. At the same time, he's a Republican mayor. At the same time, the Democratic machine in Chicago is roaring back to life under the leadership of a politician named Anton Cermak, who has built the Democratic machine that will eventually rule Chicago basically until today, right? Big Bill Thompson tries his usual tricks, saying Chermak is an immigrant from Bohemia, go get your push card, all this racist shit. And that backfires because like everyone in Chicago is like, but I am an immigrant, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like that guy, not, you know. So it finally backfires for once. The police chief and the chief of detectives that were in Capone's pocket, they're out of there after the Jake Lingle murder. And then, like I said, most of all, the Great Depression has everyone kind of sick of his shit, you know? It's been good for the soup kitchens and all that and that PR, but everyone has their own problems now. And the capitalist class in Chicago in particular is worried about this guy ruining the 1933 World's Fair in Chicago, which is coming up.
Wow, there's a lot happening.
There's a lot happening. We in LA, we have the Olympics coming up.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's a little bit like that.
Don't fuck it up.
I mean, you know.
The world is watching.
Right. ICE agents, are they going to ruin it? The fact that the head of LA 28 is in the Epstein files, again, you know.
All the stars are here.
All the stars are here. So, and that is just in Chicago.
Okay.
In D.C.
Oh, God. Here we go.
Yeah. The D.C. boys. We have President Herbert Hoover. Now, Herbert Hoover is another president in a line of conservative presidents that have been ruling the country throughout the 1920s. Very laissez-faire, hands off the economy. His Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon, is an oligarch. He is a banking tycoon. I mean, has anything changed, you know?
No.
We currently have a billionaire who's the Treasury Secretary again, right? But then as now...
Turns out they're not good at it.
Well, they're good at one thing, which is making money for themselves.
True.
And
it's like, how do you define good?
Right. So Hoover and Mellon, they have the Great Depression, they have the crash, and they're like, well, we got to figure out how to do something without actually doing anything that's going to, you know, increase taxes, cut our own bottom line, you know. And one thing they see is, you know, if we lock up Capone, that shows some vigor on our part, you know, without having to do all that much on behalf of the people, right?
Easy.
Because these are guys who don't want to use the power of the federal government, right? But an interesting thing has happened, which is Prohibition is really a huge expansion of the federal government, right? And a lot of the same problems that they had at that time, the Department of Homeland Security is going through right now too. They're having to hire more people, right? With poor training, no vetting, all that. They have more money than they know what to do with, so a lot of it gets wasted, you know.
We also see like the difference between old school Republicans and whatever's going on now because they didn't want to invoke the federal government because that's an overreach. That's
exactly right. And they show themselves to be hypocrites because in truth, now they're having the federal government go into, you know, people's homes and arresting them.
Which an old school Republican would be horrified.
Ostensibly, right?
Yeah.
So this is what's happening. In addition, there's a whole series of laws that have been started to be created enabling federal law enforcement to go farther and wider. So they have the Mann Act. That's about really moving women over state lines for purposes of immoral purposes. It's a very weird law.
Sex trafficking situation?
Yes, that's ostensibly what it's for. It can be used in a... Jack McGurn, the hitman we talked about previously, I think they tried him on it just for bringing his wife to see him in another state. It's like a...
You're not taking your wife on any trips.
Yeah, right. Honey, we can't go on a honeymoon. It is the Mann Act that's going to come after us, okay? The Lindbergh Law, after the baby Lindbergh kidnapping, right? That's another thing. So kidnapping becomes one. Auto theft over state lines. And the reason I mention all this is starting to provide the legal framework for a Bureau of Investigation led by an obscure bureaucrat named J. Edgar Hoover, it's going to become the FBI. It's also going to provide the basis for the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, led by Hoover's main enemy, Harry Anslinger. That is going to be the start of the drug war. So even though alcohol...
Wow, so this really was...
It's all laying the groundwork for everything that's going to come after, right? And when a U.S. president says one particular gang boss has to be put in prison, and again, this guy's a conservative Republican, doesn't like using the power of the federal government, we see that shift you're talking about happening, right?
Right.
And Capone, to his detriment, is not taking this seriously enough. His loyal bodyguard, Frankie Rio, is trying to get him to wake up to this. Like, the subpoena is just the beginning, right? He has a contempt of court charge. That's just the beginning. It's showing sort of the eye of Sauron moving towards him from D.C.
I mean, can you blame him for thinking he's above the law? He has been.
Well, he's a victim of his own success, which is nothing in Chicago has been a danger to him, really. But this is different. You know, the Ness raids are effective. They are eating into his profits, which are already battered by the Great Depression, right? Frank Rio is joking with him. It's like, you're going to be trading in those pinstripes for, you know, black and white jail stripes soon. You know, seriously though. And most of all, Capone's lawyers are not federal, and they're not up on the way that they're actually going to get to him, right? For all those raids.
They're thinking too small time.
That's right. And like even Elliot Ness, right? His raids on these stills, they feel like they can beat that. Those are prohibition violations. They're used to that. They've dealt with that a lot, right? What they have never dealt with is tax law. And that is what we are going to get into next. Let me paint you a picture.
Oh, my favorite thing that you do.
Oh my gosh. When was the last time I painted? Been many summers.
Probably never.
You know, the kids at school were painting Valentines.
Oh.
I didn't do one, you know.
I didn't partake.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I would never, you know. So I'm stealing Valor saying that. But I'll paint you a different picture of a sort I can paint. A Philadelphia gangster on the run.
Oh, say less. Say less.
Say less, right, yeah. Philadelphia, you ever hear a Philadelphia accent?
Yeah.
Like the Wooder.
Oh, sometimes it's like, I don't understand what you're even saying.
I had a layover in Philly airport. One caught me by surprise in the ear. Oh, turned around like, whoa, you know.
What was that?
What was that, right? Philadelphia gangster on the run. Mike Lapido starts hanging around the lobby of the Lexington Hotel, Al Capone's headquarters. He's got the shoes. He's got the wingtip shoes. He's got the double-breasted suits with the silk ties. This guy's reading the newspaper, and the mob is starting to get suspicious of what the fuck is this guy's deal?
Yeah.
Right?
And they've probably never heard of him, so they're like...
They've never heard of him. They break into his room, root around in it. They find some letters. They find his monogram shirts. They find all sorts of stuff. And they finally ask him, like, what is your deal?
What's your deal, bro?
Because this is, I don't know if you're aware of this, this is Al Capone's headquarters.
Yeah.
And you're just staying here.
And your accent's a little weird.
And you have the Wooder accent, you know. So Lapido says, he admits, I'm a gangster from Philadelphia. I'm hiding out in Chicago from a charge back there. And I'm available, basically, right? You know, put me in, coach, right? And they start partying with this guy, and they're like, you know, this guy's a tough guy.
Kind of fun.
Yeah, and he looks the part, too. If you see him in the upper right-hand corner, I mean, what do you think when you see this guy?
I mean, just purebred mobster.
Right, he looks...
The suit,
right.
The slick back hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a tough looking guy.
I'd see him at Bada Bing, you know?
He absolutely would be at the bottom. Hey, Tone, you got a call. You know,
exactly.
Right? There's only one, I guess there's one slight issue. Two. Okay. The first is that his real name is Michael Malone, and he is stealing Italian valor. He's Irish.
That guy is Irish?
He doesn't look it, right?
No.
And this is of import because I think he can credibly look Italian. He can look Jewish. I think he doesn't look Irish because he is an undercover agent beyond compare.
Wow.
On behalf of the Treasury Department, has a long storied career of going undercover. And yes, he is the tip of the spear of the IRS effort to get Al Capone with the added insurance of having a man on the inside. This amazing photo in the lower right-hand corner shows Al Capone going into court, and among his entourage, captured in the photos,
Just in the background, hovering.
just coincident, like not set up to be this way, is Mike Lapido, aka Mike Malone. So that's how
So he was pretty good at being an undercover agent.
this is how trusted he was, that they were photographing Capone and accidentally got him in it.
Wow.
Right? He brings him to court, this sort of thing. And this all speaks to where the real energy of the successful prosecution of Capone comes from: the IRS.
Always goes back to taxes.
Liz, let me tell you something. When I was writing my story on Tokyo Joe, it got broken down for me by a mob historian. The IRS are the guys who actually do the work. You know, the FBI, they're a little bit showboaty. You know, they like showing them.
And that's in the Untouchables too, where it's like the accountant.
Yeah, the accountant is the guy.
The accountant is the guy that's like, actually, there's something weird here.
And the accountant character in the Untouchables is based on this guy, Frank Wilson. Frank Wilson doesn't look like much. He looks like Wallace Shawn, right? He looks like a turtle, right? And let me tell you, this guy's one of the toughest motherfuckers we're going to talk about in this whole show, because this is the guy who sits down and just works for 15 hours on the thing that's actually going to get Al Capone, which is the paper trail. That is what is going to get him, right? He's sort of everything the Elliot Ness figure of myth isn't, right? He's not flashy. He's not publicity seeking. He's really not on the street at all, you know? He's a forensic accountant. And he's backed up by a U.S. attorney appointed in Chicago, basically accidentally.
The only thing worse than an accountant is a forensic accountant on your ass.
I think that's kind of cool sounding too.
No, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
I'm a forensic burger flipper.
I can't think of a job I'm less cut out for.
Oh, yeah. No, I would not be good at that either. You got to do maths, as the British say.
Just a lot of attention.
Improbably, there is a U.S. attorney for the district Chicago is in who is honest. George E.Q. Johnson, this fellow in the middle, another Chicago native of Scandinavian stock. And finally, the last piece of the puzzle, this guy, Frank Loesch, head of the Civilian Crime Commission, who is sort of the conduit to private money from the wealthy sort of capitalist class in Chicago to making sure Capone goes down. And so you have a weird thing of a federal investigation taking money from private citizens to aid in building a ballistics lab, you know, paying for Lapido's fancy suits to go undercover with.
Mm-hmm. They're crowdfunding.
They're crowdfunding from a small crowd. But hey, this is the way things were done, right? They're sick of being beaten, right? And this is the team which is actually going to take Capone down. Now, taxes. No one likes doing their taxes.
No, they do not.
Right? No one likes paying money. Rich people, though, seem to despise it more than anything else on earth, right?
That's so true. And they have enough money.
It's not
you know, like it affects them way less. I mean, obviously they have more taxes, but what I mean to say is, like, if you're a multimillionaire, you're still going to be a multimillionaire.
Whereas if I have to pay $1,000, it is a mortal blow.
Exactly.
And I suck it up and I do it, right?
And here's the thing. Every time there's a celeb or something that's caught for tax evasion, like they haven't paid their taxes in 5 years, how did they think they were going to get away with that? I honestly am like, I'm afraid of the IRS.
Right.
They don't give a shit about me, but I'm afraid. How are they not afraid?
Yeah, the power.
Like, you thought you were just going to not pay your taxes for a couple years and it was going to be fine?
And what? I'm going to become president?
Well, anything is possible.
You know, yeah. Yeah, look, so we're getting into the murky realm of tax law, which I know is as scintillating a podcast topic as can be, but it's important.
We're ending on a sexy note.
We're ending with what the people want. Tax code talk.
Mm-hmm.
Woohoo! You know, like the studio audience going crazy for that.
We're gonna put that in there.
Yeah, we'll add that sound effect. The 20s were a time of low taxation, right? They didn't quite abolish taxes, but they tried to, winnow it down. There was an income tax at this time. Capone has not filed taxes for years, like you said, right?
Well, he probably has, it's like, I got a guy in the IRS.
Well, and it's like no one's enforcing it, so it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right? And also, Andrew Mellon, the Secretary of the Treasury, who's directing all this, he gets in trouble later for not paying his taxes. So, all these rich guys aren't paying their fucking
Yes.
taxes, right? But an interesting thing starts to develop of them seeing this. They're going to pursue the Elliot Ness thing of all these prohibition violations still, right? But in addition to that, they're going to pursue this novel theory that Frank Wilson is working on, right? Of we can get him on income tax evasion. And it's based on, there's a Supreme Court decision in 1927 which says illegal income is still subject to tax, which is kind of an interesting...
That is really interesting.
Like, it's a philosophical thing. Like,
of course, that's the most American thing I've ever heard in my life.
I know, like, for instance, if you're a dual citizen, which I am, and you live overseas, you still have to pay American taxes on that income earned. Like, fuck you, first of all, but just fuck you, okay? That's the most anti-tax I'll get here, right? But they want to get their piece of it, right?
Wait, but what do you claim it as?
This is the dilemma, right? So if illegal income is taxable, it sets up a quandary, right?
This is why you need a laundromat.
Well, that's it, right? So
funnel it through that.
What later mobsters are going to do to deal with this, having learned from this example, is they're going to have a fake job that they can get a W-2 from and claim income with.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Accardo, future leader of the outfit, technically works as a beer salesman for a brewery. John Gotti, I think, worked for a plumbing supply company as a salesman. This enables them to declare some income and avoid this problem, right?
But what about, that company, it has to be shown that they're paying this mobster, correct, to claim it. Like, I guess I just don't understand how that all their money is then on the W-2.
Well, it probably isn't. But Tony Soprano on the show earned 6 figures from Borough and Sanitation. Right? That's a decent chunk of change. And then everything else he can sort of fiddle with, right? It tends to work. But at this time, they're not up on that yet, right? Ralph Capone, for instance, the brother of Al Capone, takes another route to deal with this issue, which is he does file a tax return for 1 year at the urging of the IRS. He declares like $5,000 income. And they nail him on that later because they say, you earn more. So the dilemma is, do you declare some income and open yourself up to filing a false tax return? Or do you not?
Fuck it.
Yeah,
fuck it, we ball. Like, I'm just not
we ball, right? And Al Capone is on the fuck it, we ball bandwagon, right? Now, the challenge facing this team is they need to, if they want to get him on income tax evasion, they need to prove a couple things. They need to prove that the money from the crime empire is flowing to Al Capone, which is actually not as easy as you might think. And they have to prove also that Al Capone is spending a lot of money, which is also not as easy as you would think. Which is
crazy because both are so, he's flaunting it, correct?
Well, you go to like every clerk and every, cashier and all that, and you say, are you willing to testify that Al Capone spent 10 grand in here? And they'll say, I don't know what you're talking about.
Who is Al
Capone, right?
I've never met her. I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. But a couple chinks in the armor start to appear. The first is this guy on the left, Easy Eddie O'Hare. He is a sleazeball attorney who operated a dog track on behalf of Al Capone. He is willing to testify to save his own skin that Al Capone was a partner in the dog track and that he funneled money to him. So that's one way that's the first sort of break, right? The second is what we see on the right here, this amazing document.
Amazing. It's just a bunch of numbers.
You say that. I think it's amazing.
Okay, tell me what's amazing about it.
1925, back when they were in Cicero, the Hawthorne Hotel was his headquarters there, and there's this crazy raid on it by a Christian minister.
What?
We talked about it previously, briefly. He went into the casino, was breaking all the card tables and roulette wheels and all that, and he grabbed a book he found in one of the offices. The book was a ledger detailing Al Capone's financial empire. And It sat on a shelf gathering dust. Frank Wilson of the IRS one day opens it and realizes, oh my God.
Wait, hold on. How did he have it?
Not clear. Somehow it made its way to him.
Okay.
We don't know the details of how that happened. You know, maybe someone handed it off, some whistleblower or something like that. But what we see in here, what we see on the video version that you can see, the columns are headlined with different types of gambling. Craps, faro, roulette, etc., right? And then on the right, you have the disbursement of funds to names like Frank, John, Ralph,
oh my God,
Guzik, and most importantly, Al. So these are Capone siblings and the main money man, Jack Guzik. So we now have some evidence, and then this trickle becomes a dam breaking, right? They find guys who buy money orders for Capone to ship money all across the country, right? Get them to squeal. They use money given to them by the Secret Six to hide them, right? They start getting regular people all around the country to testify, oh yeah, Capone bought this much here and that much here and wanted to buy this real estate here, and they're out of the grip of the Chicago mob. They're willing to talk, mostly in Florida, right? They run a test case. They put Ralph Capone on trial using this criminal theory. They get a conviction, right?
So now they know.
It's working, right? They convict Jack Guzik, the outfit's main money man. They convict Frank Nitti, the sort of underboss of the mob. And then finally, they indict Al Capone.
They often, I've noticed in just cases, that they'll wait to get the big guy at the very end.
This actually is how mob cases are going to be built in the future, right? Which is you build your way up the ladder, you flip guys as you go along. Like
but murder cases too. I mean, it's...
Absolutely. Yeah. Eddie O'Hare, right? This fucking scumbag, right? He's a rat. He's talking. A lot of what he's saying, I think, is bullshit. But on the important stuff, he's probably telling the truth, right? Speaking of that bullshit, for instance, he says that there's a plot to bribe the entire jury. And at first they think it's total bullshit. And then he starts naming guys on the jury. And they're like, oh, I guess...
How do you know that?
How do you know that? Right. They switched the jurors for the Capone trial.
I don't want to be a juror on that.
No. And there's some controversy since this one book, Get Capone, makes the case that the jury was sort of rigged by the government. I'm not sure if that's the case, but that they're professional jurors guaranteed to convict. Whatever happens, the trial does not go well for Al Capone. Like we said, he does not have guys who are experienced on the federal level, who are experienced with tax law, which is really arcane and sort of, you know, it's not their area.
I mean, he really did evade them and he makes a ton of money.
Also, he's guilty is the thing.
Yeah.
So there's that, you know. And then if that wasn't enough, they have the insurance of Mike Lapido on the inside telling them what Al Capone is thinking. Probably this would be considered prosecutorial misconduct, you know, now and could lead to a mistrial. But they were fucking sick of this guy, you know. It doesn't matter. So he gets convicted. I think he gets acquitted on one charge, gets convicted on the others. And even then, he's still sort of okay with it, right? Because he thinks this could be... This
1 year.
1 or 2 years. They had been trying before trial to get a settlement of doing 2 years, and he pays back taxes. And the judge actually shot that down, which is kind of interesting. He said...
How much, do we know how much he evaded? Like how much he owed?
Oh, it's millions. I mean, it's millions and millions of dollars, right? And which, by the way, he almost entirely spent. He also doesn't have a big nest egg waiting for him, you know? So he's got to get back out and earn in a couple years. And then the judge shocks him and gives him 11 years.
Wow.
And now we're kind of not fucking around anymore.
Yeah, how old is he now?
I mean, he's in his late 30s at this point, right? No, not even late. Let's see, he would have been 32, 33.
Okay.
So we're kind of not having a good time here anymore.
Yeah, I mean, by the time he gets out, the outfit's going to have completely moved on. I mean, they got to get a new boss.
1 or 2 years is sort of survivable, right? You can use your brothers to sort of manage things, but also Ralph is going to prison, right? Jack Guzik is going to prison for a few years.
Yeah. The whole crew.
The crew is breaking up here, and he staves off being sent to prison for a bit, but finally, 1932, Capone is able to stave off actually reporting to prison for about a year. He is holed up.
What does he do during that time?
He's in jail. He's in a hospital ward in the jail downtown, which is also, he's not an invalid yet, but his syphilis is taking on a more severe form. It's going to get worse and worse throughout his imprisonment, what they call paresis, syphilitic paresis. He's not quite there yet. Mostly he's playing cards. It's okay, right? But finally, he is put on a train to the Atlanta penitentiary. He's hiding his handcuffs here. He's handcuffed to this guy, which I always find funny. This is just a random car thief who's being shipped to Florida, who is in the same transfer as Al Capone, so he gets immortalized in history to be with Al Capone on this train ride down south.
That's amazing.
And so Al Capone is playing cards with the marshals. Elliot Ness, as a consolation prize for Elliot Ness's work not being used to convict him, he gets to escort Capone to the prison. That's the only time they meet.
What I wouldn't give to be a fly on the wall.
I don't know if they said 2 words, to be honest. Yeah, but that was the only time they actually crossed paths in real life. He goes to Atlanta. First, it's okay. The Atlanta penitentiary is pretty notoriously bad, but he makes the best of it, playing baseball, playing music, and the feds further decide to make more of an example of him and move him to your home city,
San Francisco, baby.
With a new prison that they're building, Alcatraz, which he gets there, he says something like, you'd think they were bringing in Mussolini or something like that, And the warden very sternly says, you're number AS-15 now or something like that. Alcatraz is not good.
No.
Understatement of the century.
Not anyone's favorite place.
No. In fact, did you see that coyote that got on Alcatraz?
Yes.
This is a story I'm obsessed with, where a fucking coyote, a coyote swam onto Alcatraz, and everyone
This is how we know the coyotes have never been more powerful.
They're taking on a vicious aspect, yeah.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, well, he's going to freeze to death because I think one guy swam off Alcatraz to the mainland in an escape and survived. Everyone else
dies on the way, yeah.
And he got caught immediately. The coyote gets on Alcatraz and is now the prime predator. He's eating every bird on the island. He's fat,
He loves it.
He loves it. Al Capone had the opposite experience.
Yeah.
He got to Alcatraz and he doesn't have any protection. The syphilis is increasingly wearing on him. As we talked about in the first episode of the show, Jimmy Lucas. It all comes
full circle.
It's all coming full circle. A Texan bank robber named Jimmy Lucas stabs him with some scissors he stole from the barbershop.
The fact that it's that easy to get Capone really shows how weakened he was.
And also how the outfit fucking doesn't care at all. They do nothing for this guy, which it just always, it gets to me a little bit that they don't have his back even a little bit once he's gone.
Well, we see that again and again. They don't it's care. Like Omerta and your family, but not really.
They don't give a shit at all.
Once you're not useful to them.
No, they've moved on. And so Al Capone in Alcatraz, according to his granddaughter, starts turning to prayer.
Okay.
And renewing his Catholicism. And that is going to see him through to the end. But as we know, the commonly accepted story of Al Capone is the one that, when the myth and the truth come in conflict, print the myth, whatever that is, right? I mangled that, but you get the idea. So we're going to talk about the myth that...
What people think
happened, which overtook Al Capone in the last years of his life. So we return now to the guy we started with, Elliot Ness. What has life been like for Elliot Ness in the years since his great triumph? They've actually sucked.
Really?
There is such a tragic dimension to this, to both Ness and to Capone, really.
They're two sides of the same coin.
The Michael Mann heat, vibes are so strong in this, right? Ness... as I mentioned earlier, is an alcoholic, right? He has had a life since that high point of busting up these stills and being this sort of crusader of really a lot of failure. Bad business deals over and over again, right? Marriages going kaput, drinking becoming a problem. There's a fascinating interlude where he becomes the leader of essentially the police forces in Cleveland and is undone by his inability to catch a serial killer, the Cleveland torso murderer, which there's a good book about just that. That should be a movie. That's a really good story. But this is not a serial killer podcast.
That's next.
We'll see.
For me.
For you. Oh, you're ditching.
Sorry.
You're going where the money is. Yeah. So Elliot Ness, by 1959, he's broke. He's alcoholic. He's sort of washed up, and he signs a deal with a writer named Oscar Fraley, who he I think met in a bar, where Fraley meets this guy, is talking to him, this obscure, forgotten figure, and says, I think we could probably make a book out of your story, you know. I believe Ness earned a few $100s to write I think it was about 70-page little manuscript of his remembrances of that time. And then he died. He died not long after that at a relatively young age, right?
Of alcoholism, I'm assuming.
I think of complications from that, right? And this guy, Oscar Fraley, took this modest manuscript, which is largely truthful about his role, rating stills and all that, and spins it into this yarn, this fable, stretches it out to a couple hundred pages. And this is known, of course, as the Untouchables, a name which, to my knowledge, is never used in life to describe Elliot Ness and the guys he worked with in Chicago, but becomes this hand-picked elite strike force of incorruptible.
Of course, it's based on his memoir while he's in obscurity. So it's just complete bullshit about how amazing he was.
Well, and the worst part is he didn't even exaggerate. He's dead by the time this comes
so
out.
that 70-page thing, that wasn't exaggerated?
I think it probably embellished some things, but is more truthful than the final product was, right? And the final product has it as, this is the one thing standing in the way of Al Capone and ruling Chicago, right? The IRS stuff that we know actually sunk him, right? It doesn't make good copy. It's a guy reading a book, essentially, you know? But this shit makes a good TV show, and that's what happens in 1959. The Untouchables TV show premieres after the book has become a bestseller. And let me say, the TV show rules.
Oh, really?
It's fucking awesome. It's not a shred of truth to it, right? But it's really good. Every week, Robert Stack, who plays Elliot Ness, takes on a different mobster. It's shot like film noir.
Oh, suddenly now he's just taking down mobsters left and right, not just one.
That's it. Every episode's a different mobster. It's Bugs Moran, Frank Nitti.
Fun.
It's a good show, actually. You just have to know that it's not true. And it's presented by this hack, Walter Winchell. He's the narrator, who's washed up. He's a Depression era. He's like the Bill O'Reilly of his era, sort of.
Kind of looks like him.
He kind of looks like him. And Winchell's also a wash-up, so they drag him out of retirement to narrate the show, right? And basically, if you know anything about the Capone and Ness story, it's probably from this, not from any of the stuff we've talked about the previous 7 episodes.
Right.
You know?
This is trickled down, even if you haven't seen this show.
This is the version you believe to be true.
Yes.
Right? Because this is what mass media has done. There are so many myths about Al Capone that are not true that I think we've tried to address in large part, right? Did Al Capone blow out his septum snorting cocaine? No. That is a side effect of syphilis. You deteriorate in the nose, apparently. This is what I learned. But
didn't know that.
Apparently. One historian read this in his autopsy that or his medical records, that he's missing part of his nose and thinks, oh, he must have been snorting cocaine. Probably not. That Al Capone visited Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan and Tijuana. And no, he didn't. all these tourist traps all over the country and world, right, that he never went to. They have a little sign saying Al Capone was here.
Well, even just that he's the greatest mobster of all time, to me, I mean, I think a lot of different forces converged to make him what he was. For example, prohibition. I think that's a big part of it.
Maybe we would have never heard of him had it not been
sort of like Trump, you know? A lot of different cultural forces led to him being elected the first time. So, you know.
Yeah. I mean, did the Times make him or did he make the Times?
Yes, yes.
You know, it's really a tough thing to say ultimately. And because you're right, there's this convergence of mass media, of prohibition, of his PR skills, right? I mean, it's all these things that made him remarkable. And the other thing that's remarkable is once he's put out to pasture, right, he's quickly, it's like the monster is vanquished, right? J. Edgar Hoover has now established the FBI and has zero interest in many respects, J. Edgar Hoover takes the PR mantle from Al Capone. And now instead of a mobster doing it, it's this Fed who creates the image of the G-men. And incidentally, Hoover and the FBI have zero interest in mafia cases. They don't want to pursue them because they're bad. They're really bad for business. They get all messy. They get into corruption.
But I thought the whole thing was that politicians thought getting Capone was going to really help them.
It did. And once they get him, we can stop looking now.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah. Like we got the big fish. It's over.
We got him and that's it. And don't look at the fact that the outfit is stronger than ever, that it's now in the shadows, that it's tied up to a political machine in Chicago that's going to rule for decades, that they are operating as strong as ever in the background. Wow. Don't worry about that. Right? And J. Edgar Hoover is going to say, go look at these Midwest bank robbers like Bonnie and Clyde and John Dillinger and Babyface Nelson, where when we kill them or arrest them, there's no messy questions about were the police involved, were politicians being paid off.
There are other people they can catch that don't implicate them quite so much.
Right. That's easy, right? And everyone can turn a blind eye to it. And that leaves the fact that Al Capone is still alive. And what is he up to at this time? Well, he finally gets out of prison. And there's another misconception is that the syphilis made him childlike. That's a kind of a misstatement. It made him goofier, for want of a better word. It made him the way I've read it described by Mario Gomez, the great historian, is he's excitable in the way a child or teenager is, right? He's forgetful. He's, he acts less like an adult, Is
he less violent? And I know.
I think so, because the reminiscence of his granddaughter, Diane Capone, is actually quite moving, that he's a very loving grandfather, very protective. I think this photo in particular gives an interesting little insight into what those years were like. He's in Florida at his Miami Beach estate with his grandchildren, with May, who was loyal to him throughout this time. And he is very cared for, with the added thing that he is not involved in crime at this point.
I think had he not had the syphilis, he probably wouldn't have taken coming out and being completely replaced and forgotten as well.
It's an interesting question. I was thinking about this week in preparation for this. I never saw anything after his conviction where he was raring. And look, part of it is because he was sick, right? But never anything about, I need to get my crown back.
Exactly.
And that is really notable among gangsters. That's not usually the case, Usually they'll go to the mat, and here...
They refuse to retire, so to speak.
Really, and he did. He was very protected. He had some loyal people around him. I should add, he did not have limitless amounts of money. May has to sell the Miami Beach house after he dies in 47. And,
what happens to her?
She sells the house. She has a quiet rest of her life, dies a couple decades later. Sonny Capone has an uneventful life. And Diane Capone has her name changed most of her life, and she has a nice book. You can find her on YouTube. She's an interesting, nice lady, regular lady. The family is totally fine, but that's kind of a great thing. They're kind of free of this finally.
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
also interesting that he's seen as this epitome of the mob boss. He didn't get the family into it.
No, and Diane Capone says something interesting, which is she believed that perhaps even his syphilis, the symptoms of it was played up a bit to the outfit so they wouldn't come near him.
Well, that's interesting.
Which is interesting. And her last memory of him is kissing him goodbye on his deathbed, and him saying, I love you, and her saying, I love you more. And so he had a relatively peaceful rest of his life, even if infirm, which is not the case back in Chicago, which is a more vicious place than ever by this point. Frank Nitti has taken over. He is a nasty piece of work. He is working in the shadows. Paul the waiter Rica, who a very low-key subterranean guy, is there. Tony Accardo.
Subterranean guy. I love that. Just a subterranean guy.
He looks like just an old, nice Italian
he's
man. He's a serious operator. Tony Accardo takes over, probably the most powerful mob boss in U.S. history. Blah, blah, blah. The outfit goes on. And as we start to wrap up this episode, this season, this limited series, like, it got me thinking, like, there's this concept I'm hearing about a lot this week called a power elite, right? It's like people who they're just exempt from the law.
They're above the law.
They're above the law. And Capone was until he wasn't anymore, because some other guys in the power elite decided he wasn't, right? But then these other mobsters are in the power elite. They say, we don't care. They're not causing too much trouble.
You may catch one character, but the play goes on. There's new ones emerging.
Yeah. And I mean, this is why, like, what's frustrating is this guy could have been arrested so much earlier, right? And no one did. And there's an element of hypocrisy too, of like, all right, we're gonna get this one fish who's somewhat honest about what he is, whereas Moses Annenberg, who's his rival gangster in Chicago in charge of the racing wires, they have fucking schools of journalism named for this guy, and who gets to be legitimate after a certain point, Mo Dalitz, right, the Cleveland gangster, right? Well, he became Mr. Las Vegas, Teddy Binion, this Texas gangster. There's still casinos named after him in Las Vegas, So who gets to clean up their act and do that, It's not everyone, right? And now we're at a point where one of these gangsters can become president.
That's right. That's the logical endpoint.
The logical endpoint is if you don't lock up a guy for cheating on his fucking taxes or loan fraud early, like in the 70s when he was doing this, right? It's just going to metastasize.
He's going to get a reality TV show.
And he's going to become Hitler. Okay?
Exactly.
And that is literally what happened here, right? Because there's just this culture of impunity. Like, that's the watchword for this. In Capone's time and now, impunity. Nothing means anything. Everyone's a fucking coward, and the bad guys can do whatever they want, and you can't say shit to them, right?
Meanwhile, you can't do anything.
And then on the other hand, if you're driving around Minneapolis, maybe you'll get killed, right? If you look like you could even possibly be an immigrant, or not at this point, they're just going to arrest you and disappear you, right? And it's all because guys tutored by exactly the kind of mob lawyer Capone had, right, are running things these days, And they just, they just will say, we're not going to admit defeat at all. We're not going to break. We're not going to have any shame. And that's it. And that's why, I must tell you, Capone looks pretty good to me compared to some of these other guys.
Yeah.
More recognizably human to me, Yeah,
I mean, look, I think we have done an impeccable job of explaining how the mob explains America.
I mean, pretty dark shit.
Just to tie it in a bow.
Yeah.
What have you learned from doing this podcast?
I've learned that the most important thing along the way is having friends and having fun.
Wow.
The 2 F's, What about you, though? I mean...
Same Z's.
Yeah.
I think everything always feels like it's happening for the first time.
Mm.
It's the worst it could possibly be. I think in some cases that's true. I think what this show has taught me, and I'm grateful for it, is just it's all happened before. There's a context for everything.
Yes. I mean, this is it makes me feel less alone, less hopeless to know, well, Prohibition happened and it was insane. It was a right-wing Christian fundamentalist thing and it was beaten back, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The Sicilian mob prosecutor, Falcone, used to say, the mafia is a human phenomenon. It has a beginning, it exists now, but it will end. It will end.
Yes.
And you have to believe that too. You have to have that paradox.
And let's also say it kind of did, because it's never been weaker than it is now. So let that be kind of inspiring.
That's right. We can dismantle this Trump mafia family that we have here, or if you're in the UK, the royal mafia family. It's the first time I've been interested in the royal family, by the way. This whole scandal happening right now. I mean,
girl, we got to talk.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast on that. So this whole thing, right? We can dismantle it. We can beat them back. And look, we're doing it in places like Minneapolis where these gangsters are being driven back into their boroughs,
Mm-hmm.
We can do it again. I know this election is going to be fucked up, We're going to have to probably do something like that there, But we can do it, People stood up to Al Capone and his forces in the 1928 primaries. We can do it again.
Yeah.
So I'll try to end on an inspirational note like that.
I like that.
Yeah. And also to share, like, and subscribe, which I should have been saying every fucking episode,
Yeah.
Seriously.
And where can they find you and me, if not on this podcast?
You can find me on Instagram and on Blue Sky. I finally joined Instagram.
Because of me.
Because of you, yeah.
I was like, I'm
Sullyville.
sorry, you got to get on the gram.
I got my ghost page. We're going to have a Patreon free for now. Sign up for it to find out where the future of the podcast is going. It's going to be back soon. What about you?
Me, at Alana Levinson on Instagram. I would love to keep up with you guys, listeners. I honestly haven't heard from many of you, and I would love to hear from you, and you can follow my work there. And thank you so much for listening. I love you.
I love you too.
Capiche?